I never imagined a single mirror could change the way I saw myself. That evening, when the light from our bedroom lamp fell across the glass, it didn't reflect the man I had always known. It reflected confusion, vulnerability, and something I had never dared to name. It all started with a joke. At least, that's what Emily called it. My wife had always been playful, mischievous even. On our anniversary, she handed me a beautifully wrapped box and said with a teasing smile, "You trust me, right?" I nodded, not realizing that the simple act of trust would unravel everything I thought I was. Inside the box lay silk, smooth, soft, almost whispering under my fingers. A pale satin robe, delicate as breath. "Just wear it for me," she said, half laughing, half challenging. "For fun." I remember hesitating, my pride caught between embarrassment and curiosity. But Emily had this way of making the absurd sound harmless, and so I slipped it on. It fit better than I expected. Too well, actually. She giggled, circling me, fixing the tie at my waist, brushing invisible dust from my shoulder.
"See," she said.
"You look softer."
Softer.
The word lingered. I looked at myself in the mirror, at first laughing, then pausing, realizing the reflection didn't look entirely wrong. The robe hugged my frame differently, my posture changed, my voice even sounded uncertain. Emily was watching me, not mockingly, but thoughtfully. "That's strange," she murmured. "It suits you." I wanted to take it off, to laugh it away, but something in her gaze held me there. That night, after she went to bed, I stayed in front of the mirror longer than I should have. I turned this way and that, the silk catching the light. 1,000 questions swirled in my mind, and for the first time, I didn't have any answers. The next morning, I expected her to pretend it never happened. But instead, she set a small cosmetic brush and a compact mirror on the dresser. "You said you were curious," she said casually. "So, let's find out what curiosity looks like." I froze. She was serious. I told her I wasn't that kind of man. She smiled softly and said, "Maybe you don't know what kind of man you are yet." Those words sank deep. And so began a quiet, unspoken experiment, one that neither of us named. A brush stroke here, a soft laugh there, and slowly, our mornings changed. She would hand me lotion instead of shaving cream, a blouse instead of a shirt. I resisted at first, but she was patient, persuasive. Every time I tried to reclaim the old version of me, she'd tilt her head and whisper, "But doesn't this feel more like you?" I didn't know how to answer, because some part of me, the part one never dared to show, was beginning to agree with her. And that's when the mirror started to tell the truth, a truth I wasn't ready to see. The days that followed felt like walking on the edge of a secret. Every morning, I woke up pretending to be the same husband I'd always been, but there was something unspoken growing between us, something fragile and strange that neither of us dared to name. Emily began weaving small changes into my daily life. It started subtly. My shirts were suddenly missing from the closet, replaced by softer fabrics. The heavy, masculine colognes disappeared, replaced by delicate floral scents. She said she just wanted to try. I told myself it was coincidence, but deep down I knew better. One Saturday morning, she called me into the bathroom. "I need your help," she said innocently, handing me a small makeup sponge. Her reflection smiled at me through the mirror. "Just blend this for me." I didn't know how, but she guided my hand. The foundation's texture felt strange on my fingertips, smooth and creamy, almost too intimate. She watched me closely, her tone gentle, encouraging. When I finished, she leaned in and said softly, "You're a natural." It was supposed to be a joke, but the warmth in her eyes wasn't teasing anymore. A few days later, she came home with a shopping bag. "Got you something," she said with a grin. I thought it was another prank, but when I looked inside, I froze. A pair of soft beige stockings, neatly folded, with a delicate shimmer under the light. "Emily," I whispered, "this is going too far." She tilted her head. "Is it? You looked at them longer than you should have." I wanted to argue, but she was right. I couldn't explain why my heart was pounding, why my fingers trembled just to touch them. Something inside me, quiet, forgotten, maybe always there, was waking up. That night, she convinced me to try them, just for fun. The fabric glided up my legs like a second skin, and for a brief, impossible moment, I didn't feel like myself, or maybe I finally did. She watched silently, her expression unreadable. Then, almost in a whisper, she said, "You're beautiful." No one had ever said that to me before. Not like that. Not with that kind of truth behind it. I didn't know whether to feel ashamed or grateful. I only knew that I couldn't stop thinking about it. The next morning, I expected her to laugh and move on, but she didn't. She treated me differently, not as her husband, but as someone she was gently shaping, guiding, testing. And I let her, because some part of me was drawn to the quiet power she carried, the way she seemed to see something in me I couldn't yet see in myself. But there was also fear, deep, heavy fear. What was happening to us? To me? Every evening, when I stood before the mirror, I saw less of the man I once knew. The changes were subtle, softer skin, a smoother voice, a different way I carried myself without meaning to. And yet, the strangest thing wasn't what I saw, it was how right it began to feel. Still, part of me resisted. I kept telling myself I was just playing along. But the truth was beginning to whisper in the quiet of the night, that maybe, just maybe, I was becoming someone new. And Emily, she knew it before I did. I started to notice the smallest things first. The way my reflection lingered a second longer each morning, the way Emily's perfume clung to my skin even after she left for work, the way her compliments seemed to pierce deeper than they should. It wasn't just a game anymore. Something was shifting inside me, between us. One Sunday morning, she invited me to sit while she styled her hair. I watched her with quiet fascination, the rhythm of the brush, the twist of the curling iron, the confidence in her movements. She looked at me through the mirror and smiled. "You know," she said, "you'd look amazing if I tried this on you." I laughed nervously. "You're not serious." "Oh, I am," she replied, her eyes glinting with playful certainty. I don't know why I didn't say no. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was the way she made me feel safe in my hesitation. So I let her guide me to the chair. Her hands moved with a gentleness that felt both comforting and disarming. She brushed my hair, humming softly, the same tune she used to hum when we first fell in love. The smell of her hairspray, the warmth of her fingers near my neck. It was oddly soothing, intimate in a way that words couldn't touch. When she was done, she turned me toward the mirror. I stared in silence. My reflection wasn't feminine yet, not entirely, but there was something different in my eyes. Something softer. Emily leaned in close and whispered, "There she is." "She?" I asked, my voice catching. Her lips curled into a small smile. "Maybe it's time you meet her." That night, I couldn't sleep. Her words replayed over and over in my mind. There she is. Who was she? Was she a fantasy? A mistake? Or had she been waiting inside me all along, patient and quiet, beneath the layers I'd built to survive? Days passed, and Emily began to involve me in everything she did, chores, cooking, small daily routines. Only now, she framed them differently. "If you're going to help," she'd tease, "you might as well look the part." It wasn't mockery. There was affection in it, but also a challenge, a strange kind of guidance. I found myself wearing softer clothes around the house, tying my hair back differently, even moving more carefully. She never forced me. She simply expected it, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. And soon it became exactly that. I began to find comfort in it. The domestic calm, the warmth of a home filled with quiet laughter, the feeling of care woven into everything we did together. There was no humiliation, no mockery, just a growing awareness that I was changing in ways that went deeper than appearance. But outside our home, I was still her husband, the same face, the same name, the same role. The contrast between those two worlds began to tear at me. Who was I when no one was watching? The mirror offered no answers, only the reflection of someone caught between two lives. One evening, Emily noticed me staring again, lost in thought. She came up behind me, resting her chin on my shoulder. "You don't have to fight it," she said quietly. "It's okay to become who you are." Her words settled in the air, heavier than silence. I looked at her reflection, her soft eyes, her calm confidence, and for the first time, I didn't look away. That night, I didn't dream of the man I used to be. I dreamed of someone else, someone graceful, someone free, someone who looked a lot like me, only happier. And when I woke up, I wasn't sure which version of me felt more real anymore. It was around that time that our rhythm began to change. Mornings became slower, quieter. Emily would hand me a cup of tea instead of coffee and say, "You seem calmer lately." She was right. There was a gentleness in me that hadn't existed before, like I'd stopped bracing for something I couldn't name. One evening, after dinner, she brought out a small box from the closet. "A surprise," she said. Inside was an apron, pale pink with lace edging. "You've been cooking with me so much lately," she added. "It feels only fair you have one that's yours." I tried to laugh, but my throat caught. I slipped it on anyway. The fabric brushed against my shirt, light as breath. She adjusted the bow behind me and said, "Perfect." We cooked together that night, music playing softly in the background. It wasn't about the apron, it was about how she looked at me while I wore it. Not like she was teasing, not like she was testing, but like she was seeing something finally take shape. Later, while washing dishes, I caught my reflection in the window, hair slightly tousled, the apron hugging my waist, movements smaller, more deliberate. I realized I didn't look out of place. I looked content. Still, there was an unease I couldn't shake. When I went to work the next morning, wearing my usual clothes, it felt like armor. My coworkers joked, talked, lived in a world that suddenly felt distant. I smiled and played my part, but all I could think about was getting home. To her, to the calm, to the self I didn't yet understand but was starting to trust. That night, Emily sat beside me on the couch, brushing my hair absent-mindedly. "Do you ever wonder," she asked softly, "who you'd be if no one told you who to be?" Her words landed like a stone dropped into still water. I didn't answer. Instead, I stared at her hand resting on mine, small, certain, warm, and something inside me melted. Days turned into weeks. My mannerisms shifted without effort. I spoke more gently, laughed differently, even carried myself with an ease that used to feel impossible. I didn't notice until one evening when Emily simply said, "You're glowing." Maybe she was right. But beneath that glow was fear. The fear of what the world would say, what I'd lose if I kept becoming this new version of myself. One night, unable to sleep, I stood before the mirror again. I whispered to my reflection, "Who are you?" The person staring back didn't answer, but her eyes looked sure of something my voice wasn't ready to admit. From the bedroom, Emily's voice drifted softly. "Come to bed, sweetheart." Sweetheart. The word wrapped around me like a promise and a question at once. I turned off the light and walked toward her voice, the mirror's image still lingering behind my eyes. The next morning the air felt different, as if something had quietly shifted overnight. I woke to sunlight on the curtains and the soft weight of Emily's hand resting across my chest. For a few seconds I just lay there, listening to her breathing, realizing how natural it felt that she had called me sweetheart the night before. At breakfast she smiled over her mug. "You seemed peaceful last night," she said. "I think I stopped fighting myself," I admitted before I could stop the words. She nodded, not triumphantly but tenderly, like someone watching a seed finally sprout. That weekend she suggested a walk through town. I hesitated. Outside, everything was different. "Just wear something comfortable," she said. She chose a soft sweater and jeans that were a little slimmer than I'd usually pick. Nothing dramatic, just lighter. When I caught my reflection before leaving, I saw subtle grace in my stance. The first few steps outside were the hardest. Every sound seemed louder, every glance sharper. But no one stared. The world simply kept moving. Emily slipped her arm through mine, and the tension drained away. We bought coffee, wandered through the park, and for the first time in months, I felt air on my skin without that old armor of expectation. On the way home, she stopped at a flower stall. "Which ones do you like?" she asked. I pointed to white lilies. She smiled knowingly. "Gentle but strong," she said. That night, As the flowers opened on the table, their scent filled the apartment. I realized how different our home felt now, softer, more alive. The edges of my old life had blurred into something warmer. Later, Emily handed me a folded notebook. "I've been writing down little things you say," she confessed. "Thought you might want to see yourself the way I do." Inside were small observations. "He hums when he cooks. He listens more than he speaks. He looks beautiful when he isn't trying to be anyone." I closed the book, throat tight. "You make it sound like I'm someone new." She touched my cheek. "Not new," she whispered. "Just uncovered." For the rest of the night, we spoke quietly about names, about belonging, about how strange it is to find yourself in the mirror you once avoided. There were no plans, no declarations, only understanding. When I finally went to bed, I realized the fear that once ruled me had softened into something else entirely: curiosity. The lilies stayed on the table for more than a week. Every time I passed them, I caught their faint perfume, and something inside me steadied. Emily would catch me pausing to look at them and smile, as though she already knew what I was thinking. Life slipped into a rhythm that felt both ordinary and completely new. I cooked most evenings, humming softly the way she had written in that notebook. She'd come home from work, loosen her scarf, and kiss my cheek without a word. We didn't speak about what was happening, yet every gesture told me we were living a quieter truth. One Friday, she came home early carrying a small bag. "Something to try," she said. Inside was a simple blue dress, nothing dramatic, soft cotton that brushed lightly against my hands. My first instinct was to step back. "Emily, just try it," she said gently. "No meaning, no label. Just see how it feels." When I finally slipped it over my head, the fabric settled against me like water finding its shape. My heart raced, not from embarrassment, but recognition. Emily's eyes softened. "There," she whispered. "Now you look the way you move." We stood there in silence. I expected laughter, but none came. Only quiet acceptance. It wasn't about pretending anymore. It was about alignment, an inward peace reflected outward. That evening we ate dinner by candlelight, the blue dress still on my shoulders. It wasn't a costume, it was comfort. We talked about small things, the neighbors, the weather, a movie we wanted to see, but under every word was the unspoken understanding that the line between husband and housewife had blurred into something tender and real. Later, as we washed dishes side by side, she handed me a towel and said softly, "You know, you don't have to call this anything yet. Just live it."
So I did.
I lived it quietly, in the way I folded laundry, in the care I took with our home, in the softness of my voice when I spoke her name. Every act of gentleness felt like stitching a new self together. Sometimes, late at night, I'd still feel the tug of fear. What if people knew? What if I was losing something essential? But then I'd remember her hand on mine, her steady eyes, and the lilies still blooming faintly in the dark. And I'd think maybe I wasn't losing anything at all. Maybe I was just becoming whole. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the curtains, brushing over the hem of the blue dress, still hanging from the chair. I ran my fingers over the fabric and felt an odd mixture of pride and disbelief. It had become a symbol of something wordless, trust, maybe, or courage disguised as cotton. Emily was already in the kitchen, hair tied loosely, humming while she poured coffee. When she saw me, her face lit up in that quiet way that makes everything else fade. "Good morning," she said, as though nothing about us had changed, even though everything had. We talked about errands, groceries, the ordinary rhythm of life. But beneath it, there was a hum of anticipation. She looked at me over her cup. "We should go out today," she said. "Just us. No hiding." My pulse quickened. "Like this?" "Exactly like this," she answered. "You've spent too long being afraid of sunlight." We chose a small coastal town an hour away, somewhere anonymous enough to feel safe. The drive was quiet, filled with soft music and the scent of lilies I'd placed on the dashboard. As we reached the ocean, the horizon stretched wide and forgiving. Walking along the boardwalk, the breeze tangled my hair, and for a moment I forgot to worry. No one stared. The world simply accepted us as two people in love, laughing at the gulls and the uneven planks underfoot. At a small cafe, Emily reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You seem lighter," she said. "I think I'm just breathing differently," I replied. And it was true. I could finally inhale without the weight of pretending. On the way home, I caught my reflection in the car window. Not a stranger, not the man I used to be, just someone honest. The sight startled me with its simplicity. I whispered, almost without thinking, "She looks happy." Emily smiled without taking her eyes off the road. "She is," she said. That night, back home, we sat by the window with tea, watching rain slide down the glass. The city lights blurred into soft colors, and I felt time slowing around us. She rested her head on my shoulder. "You know," she murmured, "you don't need to choose between who you were and who you are. You just need to love both." Outside, thunder rolled gently over the rooftops. Inside, for the first time in my life, I felt no divide at all, only quiet harmony, like the storm and stillness had finally learned to coexist. After that weekend by the sea, our home felt changed again. Not larger or grander, just calmer, as if the walls themselves had exhaled. I woke each morning to the scent of rain on the lilies and the soft sound of Emily moving through the kitchen. My first thought was no longer, "What do I need to hide?" but "What small thing will make today gentle?" Routine became our language of love. I ironed her blouses while she read aloud from the newspaper. She taught me how to trim flowers, how to fold the edges of bedsheets until they lay flat as quiet water. Every task carried a small note of care, a lesson in patience. One evening, she came home late, weary from work. I met her at the door, apron still tied from cooking, hair loose around my shoulders. She paused, eyes softening. "It feels like coming home to peace," she said. Her words wrapped around me like the warmth from the oven behind us. Later that night, as we sat on the couch, she asked, "Do you ever miss the man you used to be?" I thought for a long time before answering. Sometimes I miss how simple it was not to think about it. But then I remember how small I felt inside that simplicity. She nodded. It's okay to hold both truths. We didn't speak after that. We just listened to the hum of the city outside, the sound of two lives settling into one rhythm. Over the next few weeks, friends visited. They noticed the changes, though no one said anything directly. "You both seem happier," one remarked. Emily smiled and squeezed my hand under the table. "We are," she said simply. Their acceptance, or maybe their indifference, felt like a quiet permission. The world hadn't ended. It had just softened its edges. That night, I stood by the mirror again. My reflection no longer startled me. I brushed my hair back and whispered the name Emily sometimes used when no one was around, a name that had begun to feel like mine. It echoed softly in the room, warm and certain. For the first time, the mirror didn't question me. It simply smiled back. By the time autumn arrived, everything about life had settled into a new balance. Our mornings were slow rituals. The sound of the kettle, the faint hum of music, the comfort of knowing who I was becoming. The tension that used to live in my shoulders had vanished. Emily and I spent a Saturday cleaning out the closet. Old suits, stiff collars, shoes polished from a life that no longer fit. I held one of the jackets and tried to feel the person who had worn it. There was no anger, only tenderness. That man had done his best with what he knew. "Keep anything?" Emily asked. I smiled faintly. "Maybe one tie. A reminder." She nodded, understanding without explanation. We boxed the rest and carried it downstairs together. When the elevator doors closed, I caught our reflections in the brushed metal. Her, steady and sure. Me, lighter somehow, hands no longer clenched. For the first time, we looked like equals, two souls building the same home rather than performing roles inside it. That evening, she brought out her camera. "Let me take a picture," she said. "Just as you are now." I hesitated, then agreed. The flash was soft, and when I saw the photo, I barely recognized the ease in my posture. There was no performance left, only peace. We sat together on the couch, the photograph between us. Emily traced the outline of my smile with her finger. You know, she said, you've always been this person. You just needed to see her. I leaned into her shoulder. Outside, the first autumn wind rattled the window, and I thought about how seasons don't end. They just transform. Leaves fall, air changes, colors shift, but the tree remains. Maybe that was me. Not erased, just changed. When we went to bed, she whispered, "Good night, my love." And for the first time, I replied without hesitation, "Good night." No labels, no questions, just the quiet certainty of belonging. Winter came softly that year. The air outside turned crisp, the windows fogged with every breath, and inside our small apartment the world felt smaller, warmer, complete. The lilies had long faded, yet their scent still seemed to live in the walls. Each morning I wrapped a shawl around my shoulders and made tea while Emily dressed for work. Our rhythm was simple, the kind of simplicity that only comes after years of searching. Sometimes she would pause on her way out the door, tilt her head, and say, "You look content." And every time I would answer, "I am." It wasn't about dresses or chores anymore.
It was about honesty.
About allowing softness to exist without apology. I realized that the person I had become wasn't a stranger at all. She had been waiting patiently behind every quiet decision, every small act of care. One snowy evening we walked through the park, lights shimmering on the frozen pond. Emily took my hand. "Do you ever wish we could go back?" she asked. I shook my head.
No.
I think the only way was forward. She smiled, eyes glistening in the pale light. "Then forward it is." We stood there for a while, the world silent except for the distant hum of traffic and the soft crackle of snow under our boots. I thought about the first time she had handed me that silk robe, the way my heart had stuttered, the fear that had followed. All of it had led here, to a peace so quiet it felt sacred. When we returned home, I hung up my coat, lit a candle, and caught my reflection in the window. The face that looked back was calm, the posture unforced. I didn't see a transformation anymore. I saw continuity, a life that had simply unfolded into its truest form. Emily came up behind me, resting her chin on my shoulder. "What are you thinking?" "That I finally recognized the person in the glass," I said. She smiled. "Then we did something right." We stayed like that, the candle flickering, the snow still falling outside. No need for words, no need for endings, just two people who had learned that love, at its gentlest, is a mirror that lets you see yourself clearly.